Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent here with Real Property Associates. And the purpose of this video is to teach you how to write a winning offer in a bidding war or a multiple offer situation. And this video is a follow-up to my how to make an offer video. So if you want more of the specifics about some of the terms that I'm going to use here, if I don't explain them a lot here, I've already explained them in that other video. So I'll link it up here either in the comments or somewhere around this video for you to be able to access and view as well. Seattle is one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. And right now it is the hottest real estate market in the country. And in order to purchase a house, you as a home buyer need to make a competitive offer. And the vast majority of homes are selling with multiple offers and are selling above the asking price and are selling quickly. And the main reason is just because there aren't enough homes for sale to keep up with buyer demand. And specifically, the homes that are the best, the nicest homes, the homes that most people are interested in, those are the ones that go quickly and sell above the asking price and are a little bit more difficult to get. So as a buyer, it's really important to understand this competitive process and be informed here. Now, it's not rocket science. Not rocket science. I say that a lot. I don't think that this process of winning multiple offers and beating out other offers, those kind of things, it's not a secret. It's not something that is a mystery. As a home buyer, there's certain things that you can do to make your offer stronger and more favorable, and I want to teach those to you. So after writing hundreds of offers, some winners and some losers, I've learned things, and I've learned how to coach people like yourself in this process. So this video is for you if you're a client. I want you to be an informed home buyer. If you're somebody that's watching this maybe and you're thinking about getting into the market and you're nervous about multiple offers and bidding wars, welcome. Thanks for watching. And heck, if you're a real estate agent, I know some real estate agents follow my content. Maybe you're a newer agent and trying to learn how to talk about these things with your own clients. Please feel free to watch this and hopefully you can get some value out of it. My goal here though is to equip you so that you're informed about the offer making process and how to make a competitive offer. And then you're really, my overarching goal here is to allow you to make your best offer. And so I'll teach you strategies, I'll teach you how this process works, and then you have to decide as the buyer what offer you want to make. And then I make it. That's how it works. So I want to talk about the psychology a little bit first. And the big idea here is, what is the seller looking for? You as the buyer need to ask that question. A lot of times people focus on what they're looking for and what they want out of this, but as the buyer, when you're making a competitive offer, what does the seller want? Well, I can answer that in a basic sense. They want a good price and they want the best terms for themselves. So that's going to look like putting yourself in their shoes. So think about it. Okay, if I was the seller and there were 5 offers, well, what kind of things would I be looking for? What would I be wanting to see in their offer? And really what you want to do in this process is make them feel comfortable and confident to accept your offer versus somebody else's offer. And there's lots of things we can do, and we'll talk about those. The big idea though is that you want to make an offer that favors them rather than favoring you. Now, of course, you need to make an offer that you're comfortable with and that you're happy with. But the big idea here is you're trying to look out here for the seller's interests while also protecting your own to some degree. But when you're competing, the more favorable it is to them, the better it's going to be for you in the long run. So the next part here in the psychology part is the risk. So the second question is, how much risk are you willing to take on as a buyer? We'll talk about the different strategies and the different risks associated, but as a buyer, you have to determine that level of risk for yourself. And essentially the level of risk is your earnest money. Like what you're risking is your earnest money. And we talked about that in the other video. It's your good faith deposit. Whether that's 2 to 3%, or maybe it's even more if it's a competitive situation. You're potentially risking $15,000, $20,000 in your contract. So you need to make sure that you're comfortable with the level of risk that you have and know how you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your earnest money, and in those ways that you're more comfortable and confident to not protect yourself. And the seller, of course, wants you to take on more of the risk in the event that you're not able to perform on the contract, rather than the other way around. In a more favorable situation for you, the seller is the one that's taking all the risk on because they just want to sell their house and you have a lot of protection. Whereas in a competitive situation, it's usually flip-flop. You're the one with the risk and they're the one that's like, cool, if they don't make it, I'm going to keep their earnest money. And the other principle I want to talk about is highest and best. This is the idea that you're going to make your best offer right out of the gate. There's not as much negotiation in a competitive offer, at least up front. If you're a buyer and you make an offer and there are 10 other buyers making an offer, if you're not making your best offer right out of the gate, you're not going to have a chance to negotiate. So I've had people that have said, well, we'll just make an asking price offer, and if they want to work with us, then they can come back and maybe make a counter offer is the term, when the seller actually makes an offer back to you. Well, if your offer is not good, or the price isn't compelling, or the terms aren't compelling, you don't hear back from the seller. The seller just tells you, sorry, you didn't get it. So from my experience, the clients that are successful in this process are the clients that write an offer that is either really strong on the terms or strong on the price, but usually some combination of the two. We're going to talk about what that looks like, but there's no second chances here. And I say that with a caveat. If you write a great offer and you're close, maybe you're the second best on the price or the third best on the price. Sometimes your offer gets accepted, or they call you back and they say, hey, we like you and we want to work with you. This is the situation. Would you still want to buy the house at this price or with this change to the contract? But you only get that second chance if you actually write a really good offer at the beginning, highest and best. And with all of this, before I get into the multiple offer strategies, this is your offer, and I want to make your best offer. I mentioned that earlier. And so I'm going to give you strategies and tips, and I'm going to teach you things in this video, but you have to apply these in your own situation, and we'll talk about how they do, but you're the one making this offer. And so I want you to be comfortable and confident with the knowledge and be informed so that you can go ahead and do that. So without further ado, let's talk about some of the strategies. So price. Price is by far the most compelling part of any multiple offer situation. It's not always the highest price that wins, but it usually is some combination of highest price, best terms, and usually it is the highest price. I've had clients make the best offer with their terms and be the lowest price. And it was super shocking to me, actually, that we got our offer accepted. We made their best offer. And I presented it and I sold it to them. This is the best offer. It's going to appraise. We're gonna perform. And the seller took our offer. But there was another offer, actually 2 other offers that were $20,000 more. But they went with our offer because of the terms. Most of the time, it's the other way around. If you have a high price, they might call you back and say, hey, would you change this thing about your offer to match what this other person's done? So if you have both, you're really in the driver's seat. Now, we talk about price. Typically, we offer asking price. Now, you can offer more if you want to show you're super serious, but I don't see the value in that most times, because really what matters is what's your highest number on your escalation clause. So if there's a competitive offer situation, you're probably always using an escalation clause. And in that clause, you're going to pick your walkaway point. What's that top number that you're willing to go to? And then how much over a competing offer are you willing to pay? Now, I always recommend that amount that you pay over another offer is a strong number. So think about it this way. You want your offer to stand out from the other offers. You don't want to just be in the pile. So if somebody offered $500,000 and you said, I'll pay $50 more, your offer is now taking a lot more scrutiny. You're not separating yourself on the price. So now they're going to look at all of your terms. Oh, did you put 2% less on your down payment? Oh, this buyer has a different lender and we don't like them as much. But when your price is compelling, maybe you offer 6, 7, 10,000 over a competing offer. Now all of a sudden your price is so compelling that these other terms maybe aren't as big of a factor. So of course you want to have both if you can, but you definitely want to make sure that escalation amount, that increment that you're going to pay over another offer is substantial in your escalation clause. And then the walkaway point, this is the part that I get asked a lot, how do I pick this number? People will ask me, well, should I pay 5% over? Should I pay 6% over, 10% over, 20% over? And people get stuck on a number. And as a real estate agent, of course, I want to tell you exactly what to do so that you can get the house, right? But that's not really in your best interest. What I want to do is educate you about this and let you come up with that number for yourself. So the majority of houses in Seattle are selling between 5 to 10% over the asking price. That's the median number, but that's a median number, which means some are selling for less and some are selling for more. So in all reality, it's usually somewhere between 10 to 20% over the asking price is what gets it done and is the one that ends up buying the house in those competitive situations. Now, for you, you have to decide what the house is worth to you. Do you really want this house at 20% over the asking price? Do you love it? Is it a house that you really love, or is it just a house you kind of like? Or, I could see myself living here, but it's not amazing. I'll share a story from my wife and I's point of view. We made an offer. We bought our house that we're in now, like 15 months ago, 16 months ago. And when we were buying, we made an offer on 4 or 5 different other different houses during this process before the one that we actually got. But we didn't really love any of them. And so we picked a Walkaway Point that made sense for us. At this price, we would like this house. But after that, hats off to you. And that's kind of the tone I want you as a buyer to take is, if you're working with me specifically, is, okay, where's that Walkaway Point? Where am I happy if I get the house? And then where am I happy if somebody else gets the house? And if you're going to have a regret about that point, you need to change your Walkaway Point. This is a no regrets kind of situation. I don't want you as a buyer to have regrets in the positive or negative way. I don't want you to come to me and say, I wish I would have paid more. And I also don't want to hear you say, you know what, Zach, I think we overpaid. And so I want you to know going into it, that's what I'm trying to do, is help you walk through that. And it's not a set percentage. I couldn't sell you, if you pay 12%, you're going to get it. There's no guarantees. But there's, general principles and guiding factors. But the ultimate one is like, what is this house worth to you? Is it really worth 20% over the asking price? The other thing here that we're going to talk about is the earnest money. So I mentioned typically 2 to 3% of the purchase price is the amount that you'd put down for earnest money. Now, you can put up to 5% if you want, but any more than that isn't really going to matter to the seller because they can't keep it for damages. But the big part here with earnest money, and this is something that some buyers will do, specifically cash buyers, but other buyers maybe that have more capital or are really maybe they're willing to take on more risk, they'll actually release all or a portion of their earnest money to the seller before closing, meaning they're actually just going to make their earnest money deposit non-refundable. And that's super powerful for a seller because now they are really more confident in your offer. Now, I wouldn't say a lot of people elect to do this, but the people that do are a lot more successful and a lot quicker in this process. So something to consider. Of course, you're taking on a lot more risk. If you're somebody that has a 5% down payment, that's it, and you're putting all your eggs in one basket, with the earnest money on this house, and then you say, you know what, give it to the seller. You're not going to be able to buy a house if you default. So I wouldn't consider that a wise move in your situation, whereas if you were somebody that had 50% down and you had a lot of cash and you were going to be able to make that money back pretty quickly, maybe you waive it. I had one client put down $30,000 earnest money and was like, if I lose it, I lose it. But that same client was in a way different situation than another buyer who was like, I worked with recently that said, you know what? I can't risk my earnest money. This is my down payment. Or it's more than my down payment sometimes. So you got to weigh the positives and negatives to that for your own situation. The other thing I'd say, so we talk about major things here. We're talking about price and terms now, right? And then we're going to talk about some of the contingencies as well. So financing is one of the other major pieces in an offer, specifically competitive situation. Cash is king. And I tell people this, that it's hard to compete with a cash offer. So just today, one of my clients lost out to a cash offer, and it's hard to compete with that because the seller knows for sure that, well, this sale's going through, specifically if they release their earnest money or they don't have any of these other contingencies we'll talk about. They can typically close faster, and whether you like it or not, it is more of a sure bet. But there are ways that you can compete, and I want to talk about a few of those here to help you kind of get your mind wrapped around it. So as a buyer, conventional loans, which are just loans that meet the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac standards, those are typically the best in a competitive situation when you're competing. But there's a few things you want to do to compete with cash. And I talk about this more in another video, so I won't go into too much detail. I'll just link it up. But the first thing is you want to get pre-underwritten, which means that your lender you're working with has already reviewed your income, assets, credit, and they've already pushed it through and had an underwriter who's at the next level past them look at the file, and they essentially make the decision, are we going to lend to this person or not? So you want to make sure they've looked at it and they've said, yeah, we're going to be able to make this loan happen. You're going to want to increase your down payment. If you're going to do 20% down is kind of the gold standard. So if you're doing 20% or more, your offer is looked at more favorably than somebody who's doing less than 20% down. Now, if you're pre-underwritten, people are willing to look past that a little bit because, well, you've gotten your underwrite. They've already seen your file. They've already said, yeah, we're good to go. But ideally, you have a little bit more cash. If you can, that's going to give you an advantage over somebody else. The other piece here is you're going to want to work with a local lender that's going to be a direct lender, and there's a few reasons. One, typically there's a better service level, and so they have a better reputation in the real estate industry. And then the other piece is they're typically going to be able to perform faster and close quicker. Now, some of the bigger banks are catching up here in this area, but typically the local lenders are more preferred by real estate agents and in turn their clients, and they're able to perform in a quicker fashion, which is what cash does. Cash allows you to close quicker because all you do is give cash. Typically, the loan takes the longest time in this period, so when we talk about how long it takes to close, it's typically because of the loan taking that long, the appraisal, things like that. The other piece here, no financing contingency or appraisal contingency. So if you want to be completely risky, you're going to say, you know what, I've got my file underwritten. I know I'm confident I'm going to be able to keep my job for the remainder of this period. I'm not going to go buy a boat or an RV and take it out on a loan. You just say, you know what, I'm going to put my earnest money on the line here on this financing piece. That's going to give you the best chance, right? That's what cash does. Cash doesn't have a financing contingency. But the complicated part is the appraisal piece. If you're a buyer in a situation where you're talking about you don't have as much to put down or you don't have as much money in savings, now you're in a tough situation if the appraisal comes in low, because the bank will only lend on the amount the appraiser suggests. So if the appraisal comes in $30,000 below the asking price and you don't have $30,000 or you can't restructure your loan to meet that need, you're in big trouble. You're defaulting on your contract. You're losing your earnest money. So the thing that you can sometimes do is keep an appraisal contingency. So you're protecting yourself in the event of a low appraisal, but you're not protecting yourself from all the other financing bucket. So that's stronger. But if you're competing with cash and trying to compete with cash, you don't have either of those contingencies. The other thing you could do with the appraisal is offer what's called an increased down payment. So what you say is you just commit up front. If the appraisal comes in low, you are willing to make up, let's say $10,000 or $20,000, or you're willing to restructure your loan to make it work at that point. And then anything lower than that, if it was $30,000 low, now you're not having to continue to pay that amount. So you're essentially in good faith committing to the seller up front. I want to work with you on this, but at the same time you're hedging your bet and you're protecting yourself a little bit. So you're exposed, but you're restricting and mitigating your risk. The last thing here you're going to want to do is close quickly. And that's the biggest thing with cash, aside from the assurance that, yeah, this financing is true. I got to see their bank statement, is they're going to be able to perform in a week. And some sellers don't want to close that quickly, so that's not necessarily an advantage, but there's a lot of flexibility with the cash. If you do those things, you give yourself the best chance. It's not a guarantee. You'd have to probably outpay the cash offer too, but you at least put yourself in the running. The close date, I talked about that a little bit. That's another huge piece here in this competitive offer. You need to be able to be flexible. So some sellers want to close quickly for whatever reason. Some sellers want to take a longer period of time. Some want to take 15 days and some want to take 60 days. The more flexible you can be as a buyer, the better. And the biggest thing we were talking about was the financing. Being pre-underwritten usually gives you that flexibility. You can typically close quicker but you can also close in a longer period of time if you'd like. The other thing, and a client made an offer today with me, we did this, we have a quicker close, but then we're offering a 30-day rent back for free to the seller. So the seller wanted to live in the house for a longer period of time, but they'd sure like to get their money while they're looking for their next house and they're trying to buy their next house. So in that, they're able to be flexible and offer the seller the opportunity to continue to live in the house for a little bit, delay possession, but close quicker. So those are some of the things. Sellers might ask for the rent back. Sometimes they ask for 60 days. My wife and I, we gave a rent back to the sellers in our situation, and I've seen numerous clients do the same thing, and that set them apart from somebody else who said, you know what, we need to move in at the end of the month. We can't do that. So if you can be flexible, that gives you a little bit of an edge over somebody else. And then a few other things here, and this is a lot of content, but I think this is super valuable to you if you're trying to compete in a tough market, specifically like Seattle. And I want you to know how to do this. So we'll keep going here a little bit more. So we've got the inspection contingency. You've got to shorten that time period. We talked about the inspection in the other video, and that's your due diligence on the house and the systems and functions of the house. Typically, that contingency period's 10 days. That's the standard amount of time, which is a long time. And so if you shorten that time frame, maybe you're at 3 days or 2 days. If somebody else has a longer time frame, now you're in a better position. You've made your offer stand out to the seller. The most common thing that happens right now, though, in multiple offer situations, at least in Seattle specifically, the suburbs is a little different, but we're still seeing a lot of the same principles winning, right, in these other places. And that is using a pre-inspection. And that's where you do your inspection ahead of time. And what happens with a pre-inspection is the inspector, well, they'll call it a pre-offer consultation, right? They don't want to call it an inspection. But what they're going to do is they're going to go through the same process, look through the house, look at all the system structure of the house. But what they're going to do is they're going to either take notes or verbally tell you as you walk through the house. And they're going to give you an idea of what you're getting yourself into, but you're not going to get a full report. It's typically cheaper, right? We call it more of a Happy Meal than it is a Big Mac, if you want to do the comparison. You're still getting the same info, but you're paying a little less for it, and you're not getting that full report. But you as a buyer are still informed going into it. Now, you can always get a full report, but you're paying more for it, and you're getting the same info. So the delivery is nicer. So if you want that, some inspectors will actually come back and give you another report. So they'll actually come back to the house for an additional fee, usually the remaining cost between the two prices, and they'll actually give you a report. So if you get the house, you end up paying that full amount if you wanted to, but you don't necessarily if you lose out on the house. The home inspection is one of those things that the buyer really likes done earlier, because we were talking about in that other video, my first one, is that you can back out at any point during that inspection period. So if you were the seller, putting yourself in their shoes, if you had to choose between two offers, do I want the offer that's going to just potentially walk away from me in a couple days and keep their earnest money, or do I want that buyer that's more solidified and more set to work with me? So you can ask yourself that question, but I know for me, I want the offer that's going to be more of a sure bet if I can choose between two. And then the disclosures, we talked about a couple disclosures, lead-based paint disclosure and a seller disclosure form. The seller disclosure form, you're going to want to make sure that you waive that, your right to back out on that information. You get all the information up front, read through it, I'll read through it, and then decide, I'm not going to back out on this information. Again, if anything new comes up, you can, but keeping that in a contract where you can just back out on reviewing that a couple days later, it's not going to help you get the house. The other thing is that lead-based paint disclosure, same thing there. You're going to want to mark that box, waive your right to back out. Again, you're entitled to that inspection if you want it. So if you want to do that, please do it. But do know that just makes your offer less competitive in a competitive situation. And then there's one other miscellaneous thing I want to talk about, and that's there's a clause on the contract. It's called a verification of information period. It's on the 5-page purchase and sale agreement. I think it's Article W, if I remember correctly. But it says that the buyer is able to verify all the information provided about the house, more of the stats, things like that, and the marketing. And they have 10 days to review all that after the contract's accepted, and then potentially back out if they find something wrong, like the square footage is 5 square feet off, or the lot size is 100 feet smaller than they thought. A seller, again, that's normally part of the contract, and you're entitled to that as a buyer, but typically a seller would rather see that crossed off in a competitive situation because it's just another contingency baked into the contract. And as a buyer, it's a way to separate yourself. Again, just the more you can do, the more degrees of separation you have from somebody else, the higher the chance that your offer is the one accepted. And I've seen it where something as small as that, crossing off that contingency, or maybe paying a little bit more earnest money. I had a client that lost out a couple months ago because their earnest money amount was half the amount of the other buyer. And they actually paid more. They were offering to pay more, but the other buyer was willing to put more earnest money down. And so that ended up costing them. And now their most recent offer, they doubled down on their earnest money, and they made a really strong earnest money amount. They came in at 4%. So you're going to learn through this process. And I've learned, I've got to see it and witness it. And so I try to give that advice up front so you know, but as a buyer, you're going to need to learn that too. And so hopefully these videos help you learn that quicker so you can be successful. And then the other question that I get, and this is just a question that I think is really applicable here, is should I write a letter? And I would just say it really depends on the situation. So a letter can be really powerful if a seller reads it. So there's a lot of situations where sellers just kind of rip them up, don't read them. More like a remodel situation, or maybe it's a out-of-state seller, somebody that had it as a rental property, an investor. They don't really care as much about that part. They're not as into the story, but maybe it's a family that's lived there for 30 years and they do care about who's moving into their house and they've put a lot of love into that house. It might really benefit you to write a letter. I've seen the letter make the difference. Some good friends wrote a letter and the seller chose their offer over builders that were going to pay literally $150,000 more for the property to tear it down and build something else. But they wanted to sell to the buyers that were going to keep it and raise their kids there that they had. So it's a way to connect to people in a way that you can't connect to them in a binary way. So it can work. It doesn't always work, but it doesn't usually hurt. The alternative to this whole process is kind of taking all these strategies that I've just talked about and doing it early. So wouldn't it be nice to avoid a multiple offer situation? I mean, I think it is. And sometimes you can. Sometimes sellers are willing to accept an offer early, and so I always feel that out as a buyer's agent. Ask that question, are you willing to take an offer early? And if they are, then why not? But the idea here is when you make an offer early, you need to make an exceptional offer. You need to make an offer that stands out in some of these ways we're talking about: price, terms, contingencies. Why should the seller take your offer now rather than waiting another couple days and hoping to get 3 or 4 offers? And I recently had a buyer and a seller actually in the same neighborhood in Seattle that the buyer made an early offer. They offered 10% over the asking price, and they waived all of their contingencies, and they made their earnest money non-refundable. And the seller was like, well, heck, that's a great offer. I'll just take it. And they took it. I've seen in other situations doing the same thing. The seller says, yeah, I'll wait. And sometimes they get more. Sometimes they end up getting less from us because we're like, well, we're not going to pay you the same amount that we would have paid you early. And so there's a risk for you as a buyer that you're paying more for it than you would have ended up paying if you waited. But then there's a risk too that as a buyer you wait and then there's more offers and you don't get it or pay more. So it's a toss-up, right? You have to weigh the cost and benefit of that. And then essentially the opportunity cost, right? And as a seller, I had a client get an offer from a neighbor it was a great offer. It was more than we were going to list the house for. And in hindsight, it was amazing. So glad they did it. But again, not contingent on anything, good earnest money deposit, made sense. And the seller said, well, heck, we got to take this. It's so compelling. So you got to make a compelling offer. And it does work sometimes. So we'll evaluate that. If we see it right when it comes on the market and you like it, we can investigate that. But you might have to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more risky, and jump into it with a little bit more vigor and fervor than you would if you were to just kind of wait and be patient on it. But the big summary here of all of this is that you want to set yourself up for success. You want to be in a position to compete and be at the top of the pile. And so we talked about price. We've talked about the being pre-underwritten and financing. Of course, if you have cash or can be a cash buyer, you have a big advantage in the financing area. The other piece that we talked about are the contingencies. you want to keep your offer clean. You don't want to cloud it up with contingencies and terms that are favorable to you and not to the seller. And I just mentioned the terms. You need to find out what they're looking for, and then you need to deliver on that. That's the big idea here. So I hope this is valuable for you. I know it's a lot of content. I'm actually, I'm out of breath almost. Got to get a drink of water here. But these videos are designed for you to be successful in this market. And if you're watching these from somewhere else and you're not in Seattle, this is still going to apply in your place and in your market. But Seattle is competitive, and as a buyer, if you want to be successful, you need to be aware of these strategies. You need to know, you need to be informed, and then you need to be aggressive in the process. But you also need to be selective. You need to find a house that you really like so that you're comfortable going through this process. So I always ask this: if you found this valuable, if you want to talk a little bit further about your own individual situation, maybe you're watching this video and you've lost out on 3 or 4 different offers and you're kind of tired of losing and you want to get a fresh perspective, please feel free to contact me. I like to be a resource. I love educating. I love bringing value. So if I've brought value to you and you are in a position where you need my help or want my help, please feel free to reach out. You can comment below. You can give me a call, reach out to me in one of my contact methods that I've provided for you. But please feel free to reach out. So again, thanks so much for watching these videos, and I hope this brought some serious value to you. Bye for now.